Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the future of radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Monday, June 28th, 2021, and we are live. Hope everybody's doing well today. You know, people are still trying to recover from the floods and recover from the storms here in the Detroit area. Michigan State Police put out a notice today. Well, they put one out, I think, yesterday also. Notice today, if you see flooding water, don't swim in it. If you, I mean, they have to, I don't understand why they have to put, well, I do understand why they have to. Some people are stupid, but anyway, if you see flooding water, okay, don't swim in it. Don't go scuba diving. Okay, that's, I mean, it's nasty water. All right. I mean, it makes no sense, but maybe they're nasty people. I don't know. But anyway. But all right. So on today's show, we're going to continue our discussion from Sunday. We had a jam-packed show Sunday. You know, we're on 2 hours on Sunday. But Sunday, one of the things we talked about was June 26, 1844 in Oregon, before Oregon became a state in the Union. Oregon passed a law banning all free black people in the state of Oregon. That was June 26, 1854. And we also see that the Oregon Constitution of 1857 included racial exclusions, provisions against African Americans and Asians. These are going to be what are known as black exclusion laws. And we see that Oregon became a state in the Union February 14th, 1859. And it came into the Union as an all-white state. So in the second part of the show, we're going to continue our discussion dealing with Oregon banning free black people in 1844, free African Americans in 1844, and how this impacts Oregon today. The impact can still be felt today. All right. We'll talk about that. In the first part of the show, I want to deal with this story out of Amherst, Massachusetts. Amherst, Massachusetts. And I've seen this story for a few days here. But Amherst, Massachusetts, the city council has voted to establish a reparations fund for African Americans. City council has voted to establish a reparations fund for African Americans. Now, we know there's a growing call for reparations across the country, not just at the federal level, but also at the state and local level. We covered the story here dealing with Evanston, Illinois, who earlier this year, the city council passed a resolution to create a reparations program dealing with redlining, dealing with the history of redlining for Evanston. And they're taking revenue generated from the sale of marijuana, legalized marijuana, to create this fund. And that's a housing program, but it's designed to deal with a history of redlining in Evanston, Illinois. Now, we interviewed who was then Fifth Ward Alderwoman Robin Rue Simmons. I interviewed her right here on this show, and she was the one who spearheaded that initiative. But we see that other cities are trying to figure out how they can address a history of racism, slavery, decades of Jim Crow segregation, redlining, etc., at the city level. And we see the city of Detroit, there's an initiative to put on the November ballot a reparations proposal as well. Okay, so we'll talk about that on today's show also. All right, we'll talk about Amherst, Massachusetts, but also talk about what's going on here locally in Detroit. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. If you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. When you do it through Cash App, be sure to do $ the AHN show, SHOW. It'll say Michael, and it'll show my name there also. All right. We have a new online course starting up Sunday, July 4th, the 4th of July, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. I teach the class as a 10-week online course. We deal with thousands of years of history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the information right on the homepage. You can register for the course there. As soon as you register, you can start watching bonus content as well. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, is a 10-week online course that I teach. It's going to start up Sunday, July 4th, 2021, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can watch around the world. We do the classes live. All the sessions are recorded, so you can go back and watch them over and over again. All right, I want to jump into this first story here, and this is coming out of Amherst, Massachusetts. Okay, we're going to go to clip one here in just a second, Shakita. This is coming out of Amherst, Massachusetts. There's a couple of stories from the Associated Press, one from ABC News, some local outlets, Mass Live as well out of Massachusetts, but there's one here from NBC News, also picked up from the Associated Press. Amherst creates fund to pay reparations to Black residents. Amherst, Massachusetts, creates fund to pay reparations to Black residents. Now, Amherst, Massachusetts is among hundreds of communities and organizations across the country seeking to provide reparations for African Americans. And, this past weekend in Cobra, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, they just had their national conference in Cobra. I wasn't able to attend. I was so busy, but, Dr. Linda Jeffries is one of my teachers. I think he was speaking there, and some people I know who were speaking there. Dr. Greg Carr was speaking there as well. I'm sure Cam Howard spoke. Also, we had Cam Howard here on the show dealing with HR 40, going to be voted on in the House Judiciary Committee. This was 2 or 3 months ago, and it actually passed the House Judiciary Committee for the first time in 32 years. Well, if we look at this article here from NBC News, a Massachusetts town has created a fund to pay reparations to African American residents as communities and institutions across the country look to atone for slavery, discrimination, and past wrongs amid the nation's ongoing racial reckoning. Okay. Now, this is at the same time when you have an attack on the 1619 Project, you have an attack on critical race theory, you have the GOP, you have Republicans totally distorting what critical race theory is. You have state legislatures that are putting restrictions on what can be taught about systemic racism, what can be taught about the history of slavery, et cetera, in schools, like the state of Texas. Okay, all this is taking place at the same time. And this is also taking place when we just commemorated the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, June 1st. And we commemorated and celebrated Juneteenth, June 19th, and Juneteenth was just made a federal holiday this month as well. All this is taking place at the same time. Now, the Amherst Town Council, City Council, on Monday, that was Monday last week, Monday, June 21st, voted 12-1 in favor of establishing the fund and requiring a 2/3 vote of the city council to authorize any spending from it. The Daily Hampshire Gazette reported. Okay, it passed 12-1 in favor of establishing the fund and requiring a 2/3 vote of the council to authorize spending from it. Michelle Miller co-founded Reparations for Amherst, a local advocacy group that pushed for the measure. And she told the newspaper, the Daily Hampshire Gazette, that the fund sets the foundation for providing equity in the college town, which is located 90 miles from Boston. Okay, it's located 90 miles from Boston. Michelle Miller and other proponents have cited restrictive housing policies, okay, whether it's redlining or restrictive covenants, restrictive housing policies that prevented African-American families from purchasing homes in desirable parts of town. African-Americans were also shut out of jobs and educational opportunities at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, one of the state's largest and most prominent institutions, they say. So when I hear, you know, white people talk about African-Americans can be equally as successful as white people if they try harder, they skip over, just like the story yesterday we dealt with, the African-American farmers, their loan forgiveness program being put on hold by a Florida federal judge because a white farmer sued and said they're being discriminated against because they can't take advantage of the federal debt loan forgiveness. But this is to deal with decades of discrimination by African-American against African-American farmers, decades of discrimination against African-American farmers by the federal government. Okay, so they skip over the past 100 years, and African-American farmers have lost 92% of their land. Okay, about 12 million acres of land over the past 100 years. They skip over all that and then say, we want the same thing that you have, but they've been reaping the benefits for the past 100 years. The maldistributed benefits, white people, white farmers, white people in general have been reaping the benefits. But then when we talk about putting policies in place to remedy the benefits, they want to call that racist, but not the past 100, 200, 300 years of preferential treatment that they received. They don't want to call that racist. Before we go to break here, I want to go to this clip here. This is clip number 1. This is from channel 22 there in Massachusetts. WWLP 22 News. Amherst creates fund to pay reparations for Black residents. Let's go to clip 1.
The town of Amherst has approved creating a fund to pay reparations to Black residents. The town council voted 12-1 in favor of setting up the fund. The approval means the town can now begin accepting contributions for the effort and decide on other ways to finance reparations work. The council is considering a proposal to designate more than $200,000 in surplus money as an initial seed investment.
Okay, so that's from WWLP 22 News in Amherst, Massachusetts. We're going to continue this on the other side of the break. We'll also talk about the reparations proposal that could possibly be on the November ballot here in Detroit. Looks like it's going to be on the November ballot as well. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by, everybody. Stand by. We're on commercial break. We're back in 4 minutes. Stand by. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on social media platforms. Who still needs to register for the online course that I teach starting up on Sundays? Starting up on Sunday, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Stand by. All right. How's everybody doing? We have Gwendolyn. Stand by, back from break. Stand by, back from break in 2 minutes. Okay. Everybody share this broadcast in social media platforms. Click on thumbs up also if you like this type of information. Today is Kwame Ture's birthday also, Stokely Carmichael. Born June 20, will be tomorrow, June 29th, 1941.
Station, Detroit's only African-American talk radio.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Monday, June 28th, 2021. And we are live. Hope everybody's doing well. Calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right, and we know June 29th is tomorrow, but June 29th is the birth date of one Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael. So we posted an article on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, from blackpast.org, dealing with Kwame Ture, who helped coin the term Black Power, 1966, June 1966. It was being used before then, but it's a whole backstory. I interviewed Mukasa Dada, who worked with Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. They were both in SNCC together. And Mukasa Dada talked about how it was actually he who came up with the term Black Power. But Kwame Ture actually popularized it. Willie Ricks, Mukasa Dada. Mukasa Dada is still alive. All right, still crazy. That brother's something else. But anyway, I want to go back to the story here dealing with city council in Amherst, Massachusetts, passing a resolution to set up a fund to distribute reparations to African Americans. So the story comes by way of NBC News, and ABC has a story on this. I looked at some local stories also on this. This is from June 25th, 2021. Amherst creates fund to pay reparations to Black residents. Now, we see a growing push for reparations, but not just at the federal level. And we talked about this on our show yesterday. You have now 190 co-sponsors of HR 40 in the House of Representatives. All of them are Democrats. Go to congress.gov. Go to congress.gov. We talked about this on yesterday's show. So go back. You know, all these shows are archived at our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. You can read all these bills at congress.gov, bills coming out of the House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. You can read them at congress.gov. Look at HR 40, Commission to Study and Develop Proposals for African Americans Act, sponsored by Sheila Jackson Lee of the Congressional Black Caucus, Democrat out of Texas, same woman who sponsored the Juneteenth bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. As we talked about on our show, we dealt with the evidence that there's been a fight going back to the late 1960s. To make Juneteenth a federal holiday. People didn't just start trying to make Juneteenth a federal holiday last year. That is decades in the making. and the fight for reparations and Juneteenth are directly related. There's a reason why she's the sponsor of both bills. They are related. They are not separate. But if you go and read this here, this is at congress.gov. This is where we go to do research and read bills. It shows you who co-sponsored the bill, who has signed on to vote for the bill. It's 190 names. They're all Democrats. No Republicans in the House of Representatives support HR 40. Okay, so what does that tell you? And for it to pass the U.S. Senate, as we talked about yesterday, you're going to need 10 Republicans to vote for it because you need 60 votes in the Senate. 10 Republicans in the Senate right now that support reparations don't exist. You got a better chance of finding the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, okay, than you do trying to find 10 Republicans in the U.S. Senate that support reparations. They don't exist. All right, so read this here. Let's go back to this one from NBC News. So Michelle Miller, who co-founded Reparations for Amherst, and other proponents have cited restrictive housing policies preventing African Americans from purchasing homes in desirable parts of town. That's redlining. Okay. And redlining is created by the federal government. All right. A lot of these policies were created by the federal government, and they're going to be adopted by states and cities and local municipalities. But there's a good piece from blackpast.org dealing with redlining. Redlining goes back to it was created by the Homeowners Loan Corporation in 1933. Homeowners Loan Corporation was created by the federal government in 1933. Redlining we're going to see come into existence somewhere between 1934 and 1937. If we look at this piece here from blackpast.org, there's a redlining 1937. It talks about how redlining refers to a discriminatory pattern of disinvestment and obstructive lending practices that act as an impediment to home ownership among African Americans and other people of color. Now, we know that home ownership is one of the number one ways that you build wealth in this country. African Americans have largely been shut out of that one way or another. Banks use the concept to deny loans to homeowners and would-be homeowners who lived in these neighborhoods. This in turn resulted in neighborhood economic decline and the withholding of services or their provision at an exceptionally high cost. The origin of the term redlining stems from the policies developed by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, the HOLC, created in 1933 by the Franklin Roosevelt administration. This was part of the New Deal. This is part of the New Deal to reduce home foreclosures during the Great Depression, which starts in 1929, the stock market crash of October 1929, and then institutionalized by the 1937 U.S. Housing Act. The 1937 U.S. Housing Act. This is all federal law. And the 1937 U.S. Housing Act established the Federal Housing Association, the FHA. Federal housing agencies, including the HOLC, Homeowners Loan Corporation, and the Federal Housing Association, FHA, determined whether areas were deemed unfit for investment by banks, insurance companies, savings and loan associations, and other financial services companies. The areas were physically demarcated with red shading on a map. In contrast, zones which were to receive preferential lending status were marked in green shading and intermediate areas in blue shading. Often these decisions were arbitrarily based on the area's racial composition rather than income levels. Often these decisions were arbitrarily based on the area's racial composition rather than income levels. While the practice was almost universal before 1968, the Civil Rights Act passed that year, which was the Fair Housing Act of 1968. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 theoretically outlawed redlining. Nonetheless, its impact was still felt after that date. In a series of Pulitzer Prize winning articles, which appeared in 1988 under the title The Color of Money, Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporter Bill Dedman described how Atlanta, Georgia banks still discriminated by the racial designation of neighborhoods. Well, so one of the things this is showing is how white people benefit from their whiteness, even if they don't know they benefit from their whiteness. This is one of the things that this is showing when you study this history. This is why you have certain people that want to shut down the conversation about teaching this history, teaching the history of systemic racism and things like this in school, because now you're going to deal with how this whole system is put together and the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources. And if you can figure out how this is all put together, then you can understand the laws that have to be reversed and how to change this. So there's a concerted effort to suppress this from being taught in schools. And the reason why people want to suppress it from being taught in schools is because they benefit from wealth, power, resources being maldistributed. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. This comes the ideology of European white supremacy. This is for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. Racism, it has nothing to do with not liking people, calling people racial epithets, things like this. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Now, this is not attacking people. This is not attacking people who are white. No, we're talking about a system of white supremacy and racism. Oftentimes you have people who benefit from the system and don't really know it. They're not bad people, but a lot of times they benefit from it and don't know it. This is why this is a concerted effort to keep the history from being taught. Because see, once people start realizing, because you have some people that say, well, wait a second, we saw with the protests that took place in the summer 2020. It wasn't just black people out protesting. It was white people as well as saying this is wrong. This is unjust. There was white people saying Black Lives Matter as well. So read the rest of this article here from blackpast.org. This one deals with redlining. Okay. And there are other articles you can read dealing with this. His article illustrated how these banks, Bill Detman for Atlanta Journal-Constitution. His article illustrated how these banks were nearly twice as likely to lend to homeowners and prospective homeowners in low-income white neighborhoods as in affluent black neighborhoods. Now, here's white people who are low-income white neighborhoods who are benefiting from the discriminatory practices of the banks. Now, sometimes they didn't know. Sometimes, it could be a situation where they didn't know the banks were doing this. But now we do know. See, they're benefiting from being white. Now, it could be very well a lot of them didn't know that the banks were doing this or continuing to do this after 1968, after the Fair Housing Act, because it's going to be another 20 years until about 1988 where the Fair Housing Act actually has some teeth in it to really be enforced. So read the rest of this here. I don't have time to get through it. It's only 1 hour show. Redlining from blackpast.org. Okay. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. This shows you, gives you some insight into how this system works. And politics is the legal distribution of what? Scarce wealth, power, and resources. These were laws from the federal government. The redlining was created by the federal government. Okay, so when we talk about repairing the damage, we're not just talking about repairing it. We talk about reparations. We're not just talking about repairing the damage of 246 years of slavery. We're talking about decades of Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, housing discrimination, job discrimination, theft of land, okay, being locked out of loans. We're talking about repairing the damage that Mel distributed wealth, power, and resources into the hands of Europeans. And one of the ways we see this is the racial wealth gap, where the median household wealth for a white family is 10 times that of an African-American family. Okay, let's go back to this one here. So Michelle Miller and other proponents have cited restrictive housing policies that prevented African-American families from purchasing homes in desirable parts of town. We can also talk about the GI Bill. I've done a whole presentation dealing with the GI Bill and how many African-Americans were locked out of getting the low interest loans to go to college, buy homes, and start businesses after World War II. Okay, when these men come back home, and many of them many African American GIs are discriminated against when it comes to taking advantage of the benefits that they earned from serving in the military through the GI Bill. Now, African Americans were also shut out of jobs and educational opportunities at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, one of the state's largest and most prestigious institutions. As a result, the median income for Amherst, Massachusetts white families is more than 2 times that of African American families, and more than half of its African American population lives below the poverty line. Now, once again, see, now you may have a lot of white people. You have a lot of white people who benefit from this maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources, but they may not know it until it's brought to their attention. They may not really understand how all that came about. Some of them do, but some of them don't. And there's a reason why you have certain people that don't want this history taught in schools, because you have a lot of people who realize, just as we saw last summer, of different races, to realize this is wrong. You can't treat people like this. This is why America must have a massive history lesson. This is why America must have a massive history lesson to correct these injustices. You have to call them out so you can correct them. Now, Amherst, Massachusetts is among hundreds of communities and organizations across the country seeking to provide reparations to African Americans, from the state of California to cities like Providence, Rhode Island, religious denominations like the Episcopal Church, and prominent colleges like Georgetown University in Washington. Amherst, Massachusetts advocates have cited Evanston, Illinois, and which became the first African American city to pay reparations last month, as a model. That would be May 2020, as a model for their efforts. Now, Robin Rue Simmons, Fifth Ward Alderwoman Robin Rue Simmons, she spearheaded that initiative in Evanston, Illinois, and the proposal that the city council came up with is based upon a 77-page study that was done in the year 2020. Okay, and I read some of that study in preparation for my 1-hour interview with Robin Rue Simmons. The interviews are archived here on the African History Network on Facebook and YouTube, and I've got the study around here somewhere. What the hell is that thing? I got it because I took it to the printer and got it printed up. I think this is just, let's see right here. This right here. Evanston policies and practices directly affecting the African American community, 1900 to 1960 and present. This is the 77-page study that the reparations program in Evanston, Illinois is based upon. They did the research. Now, some people say, "Oh, why are you dealing with housing? Why aren't you dealing with slavery?" Well, when you read the study and you do research on this, you'll find out that the state of Illinois abolished slavery in 1818. Evanston, Illinois was founded in the 1840s. Evanston did not have a history of slavery, but they had a rampant history of housing discrimination and redlining going back to 1855, when the first African American moved into Evanston, Illinois. That's why they dealt with redlining and not slavery. They don't have a history of slavery in Evanston, Illinois. And when I called Robin Rue Simmons, who at the time was the Fifth Ward Alderwoman, and I explained this to her, I said, I've been researching this. I said, I haven't found any evidence that slavery ever existed in Evanston, Illinois. She said, I'm so glad you said that, because so many people were putting out misinformation saying, oh, they should do reparations for slavery. This is a joke, blah, 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 because they ain't do research. And when I started breaking it down to her, because I researched this, I said, I can't find any evidence that slavery ever existed in Evanston, Illinois. She said it didn't. That's why they dealt with redlining. Okay, let's continue here. Calling number is 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a quick question or comment. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a quick question or comment. All right, we're going to go to clip 2 here in just a second, Shakita. So the program out of Evanston, Illinois uses marijuana tax revenues to give eligible African Americans $25,000 housing grants for down payments, repairs, or existing mortgages. Amherst Town manager Paul Bockelman said local approval of a fund means the town can now begin accepting contributions for reparation work and decide on a financial plan going forward. Paul Bockelman and other town officials have suggested designating more than $200,000 in surplus budget funds as an initial seed investment. Okay. The council on Monday also approved creating the African Heritage Reparations Assembly to develop the town's reparations plan by October 31st, 2021. The newspaper reported it will be made up of 6 African-American residents and 1 representative from Reparations for Amherst. Councilor Mandy Jo Haneke was the lone vote against the fund, suggesting it was premature to establish it before forming the assembly. Okay, yes, she's a white woman also. I went to her Facebook page and checked it out. Michelle Miller, meanwhile, said Thursday her group hopes to establish a private fund to bolster the town's efforts. Okay, she said, quote, "We look forward to supporting the African heritage community to implement a robust and sustainable reparative plan." End quote. Okay, check out this article here at NBCnews.com. Amherst creates fund to pay reparations to African-American residents. Now, at the same time that this is going on in different cities across the country, we also see a growing call for reparations right here in the city of Detroit. And Keith Williams, Michigan Democratic Black Caucus, he called me. He's a friend of mine. I'm on the board of Grits and Politics with Keith Williams. He called me about this a few weeks ago. We know that they're collecting signatures to put a reparations bill on the ballot in the November election here in Detroit also. Okay, I want to go to this clip here from WDIV Channel 4 from this is from June 16th, 2021. Reparations discussion gains momentum with city council resolution petition drive. Let's go to this clip.
Making a serious case for reparations here in Detroit. Council leaders just approved a new resolution that will allow the city to explore potential options for this long talked about topic. Victor Williams has more on just how many Detroiters are signing on to this idea, and it seems to have momentum at the moment, Victor.
Lots of momentum, Devin. Take a look at this. This is just one of the sheets that's used to collect signatures for this petition. Notice there are only 12 slots. So if we wanted to show you all of the Detroiters that signed on to this, we'd be holding hundreds of these.
We never got our 40 acres and a mule. We should have continued what happened after 1865, and then we have all of those things that set us back, like Jim Crow.
Attorney Todd Perkins says so far enough people have signed on to have the vote for reparations appear on the upcoming November ballot.
What I understand the signature amount that's required was 3,608. We submitted, I believe, well over 3,700 signatures.
At this point, the signatures will have to be validated, but the groundwork is being done in a way that works hand in hand with a similar idea from Detroit City Council.
It is a call to say that we as a city would like to join the national movement regarding reparations.
City Council President Pro Tem Mary Sheffield says a historic resolution was just passed so that now the city can finally have an open discussion on what can be done.
We, as a predominantly Black city, believe that so many of our families have been hurt. And we would like to begin to explore ways in which reparations could play out here in Detroit.
But some leaders in the Black community, like pastor of 180 Church Lorenzo Sewell, believes a handout is exactly what this would be.
I believe that us as a people, we have enough within ourselves to do everything we need to do to pull ourselves up. I don't believe that we need a handout. Anytime you receive shekels, there come shackles.
And the resolution that was passed mainly focuses on reparations for America and our entire nation, but the ones with the signatures that I'm holding right here in my hand, this is mainly, according to Todd Perkins, something that's going to be for Detroiters specifically. As far as where the money is coming from, he's saying maybe we should dip into the marijuana money because a lot of those funds have yet to be allocated. Victor Williams.
On it, all right, Victor. I photograph.
Okay, pause right there. All right, that's courtesy WDIV Channel 4 in Detroit. That's on June 16th, 2021. They have an article dealing with this at clickondetroit.com. Clickondetroit.com. Detroit City Council approves reparations resolution. That's an article from clickondetroit.com. This clip is also on their YouTube channel, WDIV's YouTube channel. Name of that clip is Reparations Discussion Gains Momentum with City Council Resolution Petition Drive. Okay. Now, the pastor that you heard, see, this is an example of how you need to go study some history. Okay. There's always an Isaiah T. Montgomery in the bunch. There's always an Isaiah T. Montgomery in the bunch. Who was Isaiah T. Montgomery? Isaiah T. Montgomery was the only African-American delegate at the Mississippi State Convention in 1890 when they voted on the Mississippi State Constitution, and the Mississippi State Constitution instituted poll taxes and literacy tests. And Isaiah T. Montgomery was the founder of Bayou, Mississippi. He was a wealthy African-American. He owned land. He was also the first mayor of Bayou, Mississippi. And he voted against the interests of his own people, along with these white supremacists at the Mississippi State Convention. Okay. We talked about this before as well. Read this article here from Washington Post. The Mississippi plan to keep blacks from voting in 1890. We came here to exclude the Negro. Okay. Now, the quote, "We came here to exclude the Negro," that is what the convention president, Solomon Saladin Calhoun, who was a white county judge, that's what he said. He said, this is why we're here. He said, quote, "Let's tell the truth if it bursts the bottom of the universe. Let's tell the truth if it bursts the bottom of the universe. We came here to exclude the Negro. Nothing short of this will answer." And Isaiah T. Montgomery voted along with the white supremacists against the interests of his own people. Okay, that's Hiram Rhodes Revels. He was the first African-American U.S. senator from Mississippi. Who was not the first, he's the only. They haven't had one since 1870 when he was sworn in. 1870. They haven't had one since Reconstruction because of the restrictive voting laws that were passed in Mississippi. This is one of the reasons why you needed a Voting Rights Act of 1965. Okay, and it's been attacked. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 has been attacked since it was signed into law in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson. This is Isaiah T. Montgomery. I think he's related to Senator Tim Scott, also of South Carolina. This is Isaiah T. Montgomery. All right. So there's always one in the bunch. This is why you need to understand history. So let's go back to this article here from Detroit Free Press. Name of this article is Detroit City Council pushes ahead with reparations initiative. Detroit City Council pushes ahead with reparations initiative from Dana Afana, June 15th, 2021. And that's Mary Sheffield, President Pro Tem of the Detroit City Council and City Councilwoman of District 5. So the resolution also states that African Americans have been unjustly enslaved, segregated, incarcerated, denied housing, quote, through racist practices, end quote, in public and private markets, denied mortgages, displaced and faced racial steering, redlining, blockbusting, gentrification, and more. This don't have nothing to do with what the hell we got in us. What we're talking about is what happened to us. Okay, this is what we're talking about. This is what happens when you don't understand history. Attorney Todd Perkins, and I know Todd. I just saw Todd. What day is this? Monday. I saw Todd Thursday. I had to go get my hair cut, and his law office is in the same building. So Attorney Todd Perkins is submitting a ballot initiative for the November 2020 election, seeking to amend a portion of the city charter, I'm sorry, 2021, seeking to amend a portion of the city charter, which, quote, restricts from the voters to enact city ordinances for the appropriation of money, restricts power from the voters to enact city ordinances for the appropriation of money, end quote, according to the petition. Now, he said this is a way to sequester funds from marijuana revenue sales to be placed in a reparations fund or committee. This don't have nothing to do with handouts. This has nothing to do with handouts. This deals with repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery, decades of Jim Crow segregation, redlining, etc., that have created the racial disparities that exist today. This don't have nothing to do with handouts. Quote, they would then decide how these monies would be spent and for what purpose, said Attorney Todd Perkins, who told the Detroit Free Press he received nearly 4,000 signatures. He said, quote, it creates a sense of understanding and acknowledgement that, okay, you were actually wronged. There's an acknowledgement that something went wrong. Well, not only that, we deal with the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts of 1952 and 1956 that drove about 41,000 miles of U.S. interstate highways all across the country. They ran right through Black Bottom and Paradise Valley right here in Detroit, wiping out businesses and homes. About 300 businesses wiped out. Those African Americans are going to be displaced over the 12th and Claremont. Many of them go over the 12th and Claremont. So when the rebellion jumps off 1967, those people were already angry because they lost their homes because the expressways ran through. This ain't nothing about no damn handout. What are you talking about? You need to do some research. It creates a sense of understanding and acknowledgement that, okay, you were actually wronged. There is an acknowledgement that something went wrong. Now, Michigan Democratic Black Chair Keith Williams, who's a friend of mine, is working with Attorney Todd Perkins, another friend of mine, on pushing for reparations for African-American Detroiters, Keith Williams said. Keith said, quote, you can go back to 1792 when William Macomb, who Macomb is named after, Macomb Street, William Macomb had 26 slaves, Williams said. You could throw in Lewis Cass also. Lewis Cass owned at least one slave. That's who Cass Technical High School is named after, and the name of Cass Tech needs to be changed. I've been telling you that. And Lewis Cass was also President Andrew Jackson's Secretary of War, and he helped carry out the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which pushed the Choctaw, Chickasaw Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians off their land in southeastern United States, sent them over 1,000 miles into Oklahoma on what's known as the Trail of Tears, and 1/3 of the people on the Trail of Tears were African people. These were the slaves of those 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans. This is Lewis Cass, who was involved in the suppression and attacking and displacement of African Americans. And this is whose Cass Technical High School is named after. So when we talk about repairing the damage, we also got to repair the damage to the minds of Negroes as well, because we've been mentally damaged. This is something that Dr. Carter G. Woodson talked about in his most famous book, The Miseducation of the Negro. They wouldn't give loans. Keith said they wouldn't give loans to African Americans. Then you had the city of Detroit ordinances created where African Americans live in slums, so they could use federal money for a highway system in their community. Then you got the 1967 riot. He said riot is actually rebellion. He probably meant rebellion. It's a rebellion. We were rebelling against a system of white supremacy, racism. And all you have to do is go read the Kerner Commission report that was commissioned in about June, July 1967, came out March 1968, commissioned by President Lyndon Johnson, okay, and Governor Otto Kerner of Illinois. He headed it up, so that's why I got the name Kerner, the Kerner Commission. It talked about what caused the rebellions. It talked about a disinvestment in the cities. It talked about poor education, poor opportunity for jobs. It talked about the racism and discrimination that was inflicted upon African Americans. This is not talking about no hand up, okay? This is talking about get your knee off our neck. This is dealing with repairing the damage. Now, when let's see, so Keith Williams added that the caucus also endorsed Proposal P, a ballot initiative to amend the city's charter, the city of Detroit's charter. Part of the changes includes establishing a reparations task force. When he said, when Mary's resolution, Councilwoman Pro Tem Mary Sheffield. When Mary's resolution was voted on, then passed, he said, I had tears in my eyes. I look at the people who left Black Bottom. Okay. I thought about the people who went through police brutality right here in the city of Detroit. And a lot of that happened before Mayor Coleman Alexander Young, Mayor Coleman Alexander Young became mayor, because when he became mayor, one of the first things he did was to integrate the police force, because there was such rampant police brutality by white police officers taking place before the 67 rebellion. We can go back to the 1943 Detroit race riot up and down Woodward Avenue during World War II. We can go back to the 1943 Detroit race riot. So he said the people who have been impoverished all of their lives in Detroit, all of the wealth that was taken from us. I say God is good, Keith Williams said. Now, the resolution from City Council highlights that the city addresses a range of issues, including right to water and sanitation. That's not a handout. Right to environmental health. That's not a handout. Right to safety. Right to live free from discrimination, including people with disability, immigrants, LGBTQ, and others. That's not a handout. Right to recreation, right to access and mobility, right to housing, right to the fulfillment of basic needs. Okay, read the rest of this. It goes on to say, Mary Sheffield says there's a lot of systemic issues that African Americans face, and this is a predominantly Black city and needs to stay a predominantly Black city as well. She said, I think it's important that we acknowledge it and we at least begin to have conversations on how to address the issues of reparations. Okay, so read the rest of this article. Those watching on Facebook and YouTube, we're going to keep broadcasting. We're out of time here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. We're going to talk about when Oregon banned Black people, free Black people in 1844. We'll continue that discussion. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. Stand by. Stand by. All right. We're going to keep going here. We're out of time here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. How's everybody doing? Hey, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Okay, we definitely need your support. This helps us keep broadcasting 6 days a week, because as you know, as I said before, some people don't know this, right? I'm on the radio. I don't get paid to do radio, right? I don't get paid to do radio. So this helps to finance all this. All right. This helps us keep broadcasting 6 days a week, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Okay. $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Now, we have a new online course starting up Sunday, July 4th, the 4th of July, Sunday, July 4th, 2021. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in schools. Class number 1. This is a 10-week online course that I teach. When you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, scroll down. It's a 10-week online course that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history and what led up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Click on register here, takes you to the next page. And it says 20-hour online course. Click here to enroll. It's regularly $130, on sale $80. This is a 10-week online course. We do the class live. All of the sessions are recorded. So you can go back and watch it over and over again. Okay. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips, guest speakers. Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. He spoke to my class June 12th, because I have a Saturday class that's wrapping up right now. We have 3 more sessions of the Saturday class. And he spoke to my class. We had archaeologist Nubia Wardford speak to my class a few weeks ago. So we do the classes live. All the sessions are recorded. You can go back and watch them over and over again. And what we're going to do when you register for the class, we're also going to enroll you in the Saturday class. So you can watch classes 1 through 7 of the Saturday class. And you can also join us live Sunday, July 4th, 2021 for 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa. Understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay. All right. So I want to go to this next story here, and let's see. Read the book, How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. How White Folks Got So Rich, The Untold Story of American White Supremacy. And this book deals with a lot of the laws and policies that were put in place to maldistribute wealth, power, and resources. And it deals with the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts in 1952 and 56. It deals with, the expressways. It deals with the redlining, steering, all those policies to maldistribute wealth, power, and resources. This is after slavery. Okay, this is after slavery. There's also a piece from NBCnews.com that deals with the expressways, because there's more talk in different cities dealing with trying to repair some of the damage that the expressway systems have done, and going through the expressway systems going through and wiping out homes and businesses, disrupting communities, etc. Okay. There's a piece from I saw this clip, and Jamon Jordan is in it also. They've shown it on MSNBC. Jamon Jordan, historian here in Detroit, a friend of mine. We've had him here on the show before. I'm not sure if this one, we'll try to talk about this sometime this week, because I have some other things lined up. But if you look at this piece here from June 18th, 2021, from NBC News, okay? And this is all connected. We're talking about repairing the damage. We're not talking about a handout. Bulldozed and bisected. Bulldozed and bisected. Highway construction built a legacy of inequality, where their removal healed historic wounds. Highway construction built a legacy of inequality. Will their removal heal historic wounds? Okay. So read this article here from NBCnews.com. This is from June 18th, 2021. Bulldozed and bisected. Highway construction built a legacy of inequality. All right, now I want to go to this next story here. So on our show yesterday, we started talking about what happened in Oregon in 1844, June 26, 1844. Oregon was a territory. It wasn't a state in the Union. And they passed a law that banned all free African Americans. Okay. They passed a law banning all free African Americans. There was a piece from Equal Justice Initiative that talked about this, and we shared that on yesterday's show, on Monday's show. So we're going to recap that, and then I want to go to this piece from the Washington Post that goes more in depth, and there's some information also from blackpast.org. June 26, 1844, Oregon bans free African Americans. Okay. On June 26, 1844, the Legislative Committee of the territory then known as Oregon County passed the first of a series of Black exclusion laws. The law dictated that free African Americans were prohibited from moving into Oregon County, and those who violated the ban could be whipped, not less than 20, no more than 39 stripes. They could be, those who violated the ban could be whipped, not less than 20, no more than 39 stripes. That December, the law was amended to substitute forced labor for whipping. It specified that African Americans who stayed within Oregon would be hired at a public auction, and that the hirer would be responsible for removing the hiree out of the territory after the prescribed period of forced service was rendered. This law was enforced even though slavery and involuntary servitude were illegal in Oregon. All right. The preamble to a later exclusion law passed in 1849, it explained legislators' beliefs that, quote, it would be highly dangerous to allow free Negroes and mulattoes to reside in the territory of Oregon County, or Oregon Country, I should say, or to intermix with Indians, instilling feelings of hostility toward the white race, okay? Or intermix with Indians, instilling feelings of hostility toward the white race. Now, the Oregon Constitution of 1857 included racial exclusion provisions against African Americans and Asian Americans. And then we know February 14th, 1849, Oregon joins the Union as an all-white state. Okay. Oregon joins the Union as an all-white state. All right, so that's from EJI.org, Equal Justice Initiative. Now, I want to look at this piece from Washington Post. This is by Deneen L. Brown, June 7th, 2017. When Portland banned blacks, Oregon's shameful history of an all-white state. And let me pull this up here. Do I have this one? Okay, let me pull this one up also. Just 1 second here. All right, so in 1844, and they show a picture here, the Ku Klux Klan parade, East Main Street in Ashland, Oregon in the 1920s. They show the Klan having a parade, the Klan marching. All right. So in 1844, in 1844, all African Americans were ordered to get out of Oregon Country, the expansive territory under American rule that stretched from the Pacific coast to the Rocky Mountains. It stretched from the Pacific coast to the Rocky Mountains. And actually, if you look here, we have the map. Get to see Oregon Country here. Okay, United States here. So it's not a state in the Union yet. It becomes a state in the Union in 1859. This is British North America, Canada. This is Vancouver over here, part of Canada, Pacific Ocean. Okay, so in 1844, all African Americans were ordered to get out of Oregon Country, the expansive territory under American rule that stretched from the Pacific coast to the Rocky Mountains. Those who refused to leave could be severely whipped, the provisional government law declared, but not less than by not less than 20 or more than 39 stripes, end quote, to be repeated every 6 months until they left. To be repeated every 6 months until they left. They would be beaten every 6 months until they left. Okay, Oregon Country. Now, these laws still have an effect on the racial makeup of Oregon today. This is why it's one of the whitest states in the country. Now, Oregon Country's provisional government was led by Peter Burnett, a former slaveholder who came west from Missouri by wagon train, and he passed a law in 1845, 15 years before Oregon became a state. The law allowed slaveholders to keep their slaves for a maximum of 3 years. The law allowed slaveholders to keep their slaves for a maximum of 3 years. After the grace period, all African Americans, those considered freed or enslaved, were required to leave Oregon country. African American women were given 3 years to get out. African American men were required to leave in 2. I'm not exactly sure why they wanted African American women to stay an extra year. I can guess, but not exactly sure. So the law became known as the Peter Burnett Lash Law. The Peter Burnett Lash Law. Burnett, who also opposed Chinese migration to Oregon country, would later become the first American governor of California. Okay, later became the first American governor of California, and there was discrimination against both African Americans and Asian Americans in California also. There was a, let me see, there was a piece here. Who had that article? Because they have a picture of Peter Burnett. Oregon Live. I think this one right here from OregonLive.com. Yeah, this one right here. Black History Month, Oregon's exclusion laws aim to prevent blacks from settling here. This is from January 10th, 2019. This is Peter Burnett, author of Oregon's 1844 exclusion law. This is Peter Burnett. He became the first governor of California. All right. First American governor of California. Now, the Lash Law, named after Peter Burnett, the Peter Burnett Lash Law, was quickly amended and then repealed. No African Americans were ever lashed under the law. Okay, but it's originally called the Peter Burnett Lash Law. But the act would become the first of 3 exclusion laws. Okay, the act would become the first of 3 exclusion laws that shaped the Pacific West, banning any additional African Americans from coming to Oregon country. Okay, the act would become the first of 3 exclusion laws that shaped the Pacific West, banning any additional African Americans from coming to Oregon country. Now, those laws created what one African American professor calls a very hostile environment, that has long made Oregon and its largest city, Portland, okay, Portland, Oregon, where the Trailblazers are from, the NBA team. I think they're still from Portland. A stronghold. Is made Portland a stronghold for white supremacists like Jeremy Joseph Christian, the man accused of killing 2 men and severely wounding another on a light rail train in May of 2017. May of 2017. This article is from June 7th, 2017. Now, few people are aware of Oregon's history of blatant racism, including its refusal to ratify the 14th and 15th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. 14th Amendment dealing with citizenship, 15th Amendment dealing with guaranteeing the right to vote for African American men, 15th Amendment 1870, 14th Amendment of 1868. Now, in 1848, the territorial government passed a law. This is before Oregon becomes a state in the Union. That's not until 1859. In 1848, the territorial government passed a law making it illegal for any Negro or mulatto to their words, not mine, to live in Oregon country. In 1850, under the Oregon Donation Land Act, the Oregon Donation Land Act, whites and half-breed Indians were granted 650 acres of land from the government. Okay, white people and half-breed Indians were granted 650 acres of land from the government. But any other person of color was excluded from claiming land in Oregon. In 1851, Jacob Vanderpool, the African-American owner of a saloon restaurant, and boarding home, was actually expelled from Oregon territory. The Salem Public Library records state, quote, the exclusion laws were primarily intended to prevent blacks from settling in Oregon, not to kick out those who were already here. The exclusion laws were primarily intended to prevent blacks from settling in Oregon, but not to kick out those who were already here, according to Salem Public Library records. But Vanderpool's neighbor, quote, reported him for the crime of being black in Oregon, and Judge Thomas Nelson gave him 30 days to leave the territory. Okay, he got reported for being black in Oregon. Now, in 1857, as Oregon sought to become a state, it wrote the exclusion of blacks into its constitution. This is the 1857 Constitution of State Constitution of Oregon. They stated, quote, no free Negro, just a second, no free Negro or mulatto not residing in this state at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall ever come, reside, or be within this state, or hold any real estate, or make any contract, or maintain any suit therein, and the legislative assembly shall provide by penal laws for the removal by public officers of all such free Negroes and mulattoes, and for their effectual exclusion from the state, and for the punishment of persons who shall bring them into the state, or employ or harbor them therein. Okay, let me repeat that. This is in the 1857 State Constitution of Oregon. Okay, as Oregon sought to become a state in the Union of the United States of America, it wrote the exclusion of blacks, of African Americans, into its constitution. The 1857 State Constitution of Oregon says, quote, no free Negro or mulatto not residing in this state at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall ever come, reside, or be within this state, or hold any real estate. They're making it illegal for African Americans to own land in Oregon, or hold any real estate, or make any contract, or maintain any suit therein. And the legislative assembly shall provide for penal laws for the removal by public officers of all such free Negroes and mulattoes, and for their effectual exclusion from the state, and for the punishment of persons who shall bring them into the state, or employ or harbor them therein. So they're saying you're going to be punished if you hire these Negroes or mulattoes, if you harbor them, if you have them stay with you, you try to hide them, protect them, if you bring them into the state. This is a total exclusion of free African Americans and mulattoes in the state of Oregon in their state constitution of 1857. Now, when Oregon entered the Union of the United States in 1859, it did so as a quote unquote whites only state. It did so as a whites only state. The original state constitution of Oregon banned slavery, but also excluded non-whites from living there. So they banned slavery, but they also excluded non-whites from living in Oregon. Now, Winston Grady Willis, director of Portland State University School of Gender, Race, and Nations, said Oregon is the only state in the United States that actually began as literally whites only. Oregon is the only state in the United States that actually began as literally whites only. He went on to say, even though there was subsequent legislation that challenged those statutes, the statutes were not removed from the books until 1922. Now, Grady Willis went on to say, it's really important for folks to understand this notion of Oregon as this lily white state sets the tone and is important structurally for the remainder of history of not only the state of Oregon, but cities like Portland, Oregon as well. Now, Portland, Oregon's reputation as a progressive city is largely a myth, he said. Is largely a myth, he said. According to the July 2015 census report, the city of Portland, Oregon had 612,000 people and was 77.6% white and 5.8% African American. Grady Willis called it, quote, a key site for Klan activity, a key site for Ku Klux Klan activity. Now, this is the historical backdrop for the charges against Christian, 35 years old, who allegedly verbally abused two women on the train, including one wearing a hijab, and then attacked the men who came to her aid. Okay, I remember that case when that happened. Okay. Now, Oregon has a defiant history of resisting federal laws that gave African Americans rights. When we look at the 14th Amendment, Karen Gibson, who's an associate professor in Portland State's Tulane School of Urban Studies and Planning, said Oregon rescinded its initial ratification of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which granted citizenship to, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, end quote, including former slaves. Oregon rescinded its initial ratification of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Now, just 1 second here. Okay, now Oregon was just one of 6 states that refused to ratify the 15th Amendment, which gave African American men the right to vote. Oregon was just one of 6 states that refused to ratify the 15th Amendment of 1870. Oregon did not ratify the 15th Amendment, which was ratified by the other states in 1870. Oregon did not ratify the 15th Amendment until 1959, 100 years after the state joined the Union in 1859. It was a symbolic adoption as part of its centennial celebration. This 100th anniversary celebration as being a state in the Union. They did it as symbolism. It was a symbolic adoption for Oregon to ratify the 15th Amendment in 1959. It did not re-ratify the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution until 1973. Now, many white settlers who came to Oregon came here for the Oregon Land Donation Act. The Oregon Land Donation Act. This place was intentionally settled by whites for whites, Gibson said. Okay, and that gave 600. The Oregon Donation Land Act gave whites and half-breed Indians 650 acres of land. They were allocated that from the government. Quote, they did not want slavery here. They didn't want land taken over by large plantations. So they did not have to compete with bonded labor. So they didn't have to compete with bonded labor. They didn't want to compete with the labor of enslaved Africans because you can't work cheaper than free. And we know there were at least 262 skills, trades, and crafts that African people had in this country from 1619 to 1865. So you're going to see these efforts by some people to keep slavery out of areas, not for moral reasons, not because they felt slavery was wrong and they didn't feel they felt people shouldn't be treated like that. Well, it's because of economic reasons. They didn't want slaves doing the work and doing the jobs that white men were doing, because we had skills and trades. Okay, we were skilled tradespeople also. We weren't just picking cotton. So you're going to see this. You're going to see this fight as well, trying to keep slavery out of areas for economic reasons. Quote, they did not want slavery here. They did not want land taken over by large plantations, so they didn't have to compete with bonded labor. But they also thought blacks were inferior. They also thought blacks were inferior. That is still here. White supremacy is about that. The beliefs that whites are supreme. Now, Darnell Milner, I should say, Professor Emeritus in Portland State's Black Studies Department, said many early Oregon settlers were opposed to slavery. Quote, not because of what it did for blacks, but because of what it did to them, to white people. Not because of what it did to African Americans, but because of what it did to white people. Slavery represented a competition they did not wish to work against, end quote. Now, Darnell Milner said Oregon became a place where many practices we associate with the Jim Crow South were legal here. Many practices we associate with the Jim Crow South were legal in Oregon. In the 1920s, Oregon had the largest Ku Klux Klan organization west of the Mississippi River. In 1922, Walter Pierce, a member of the Ku Klux Klan, was elected governor of Oregon. Now, he's a member of the Ku Klux Klan, elected governor of Oregon. We see that Peter Burnett, who came up with the Black Exclusion Laws of 1844, we see he became the first American governor of California. Now, Walter Pierce served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 1932 to 1942. Okay, and then in we know in 1922 he became governor of Oregon. He was a Klan member. They showed some more Klan members there. It says Jesus saves above them. Question we should ask is, Jesus saves who? Who is it saving them? Who is it saving? Who is Jesus? I'm just asking. The question says Jesus saves. So my response would be, Jesus saves who or whom? Now, Oregon's hostility toward African Americans remains part of the state's culture. It remains part of the culture of Oregon. In the 1980s and 90s, Oregon became a destination for the largest skinhead movement in the country, Darnell Milner said. Professor Emeritus in Portland State's Black Studies Department. Daryl Milner. I said Daryl Milner. In the 1980s and 90s, Oregon became a destination for the largest skinhead movement in the country. Okay, Daryl Milner said, quote, their objective was to achieve something pioneers tried to achieve here, and that was to create a white homeland. Now, Daryl Milner said that in the 1980s and 90s, quote, in Oregon, and especially in Portland, Oregon, it was very dangerous for a person of color, end quote. An infamous racial attack occurred in Portland in 1988 when an Ethiopian immigrant was fatally beaten by 3 white supremacist skinheads on the streets of Portland, Oregon. Mulugeta Sarah was a student at Portland University. He was killed by 3 white supremacists who were members of the white Aryan resistance who beat him with a baseball bat. In 1990, the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League won a lawsuit against the white Aryan resistance on behalf of Sarah's family. Daryl Miller said he has lived in Oregon 47 years. He said when he heard about the stabbings on the train in May of 2017, the stabbings on the train in May of 2017, he said he was disturbed but not surprised. He said it reinforced the subterranean awareness all people of color in Oregon have that something like that could happen to them at any time and in place. Anytime and in any place. That is reflective of what people of color in Oregon live with. It is on a subconscious level daily. You are constantly aware that is a possibility. Okay, so check out this article here from this is from June 7th, 2017. When Portland banned blacks, Oregon's shameful history as an all-white state. When Portland banned blacks, Oregon's shameful history as an all-white state. And this is by Deneen L. Brown for the Washington Post. Okay. Now, very quickly here, lastly, there's also a piece from blackpast.org that deals with Black Laws of Oregon, 1844 to 1877, 1844 to 1857. Okay. Black Laws of Oregon, blackpast.org, 1844 to 1857. So you can check this out as well. It's another good article, a lot of historical information. Black Laws of Oregon, 1844 to 1857. And just briefly here, it says beginning with the exclusion law of 1844, enacted by the provisional government of the region of Oregon country before it became a state in the Union, Oregon passed a series of measures designed to ban African American settlement in the territory. Historian Elizabeth McLagan describes those laws in the article below. Now, Oregon passed exclusion laws against African Americans twice during the 1840s, considered another law in the 1850s, and in 1857 approved an exclusion clause as part of its constitution. Exclusion laws were also passed in Indiana, Illinois, and considered in Ohio, but Oregon was the only free state admitted to the Union with an exclusion clause in its constitution. All right, so read the rest of this here. The Black Laws of Oregon, 1844 to 1857. So we talk about repairing the damage of slavery. It's not just being enslaved, it's oppressive laws like this that help to maldistribute wealth, power, and resources into the hands of Europeans. Okay. If you like this type of information, also you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN Show, paypal.me / the AHN Show. And this helps us keep broadcasting 6 days a week, keep doing the research, stay on the air. Or at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Click on the yellow donate button. And when you do it, do Cash App, be sure to type in $ the AHN Show, SHOW, to say Michael and show my name there. We have the real, a real Cash App account up, and these other ones are fake ones. Be sure to register for the online course that I teach. We have a new one starting up Sunday, July 4th, 2021. It's going to be 10 consecutive Sundays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Maafa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Kemet is one of the original names for Egypt. Maafa is a Kiswahili term referring to the great disaster, our Holocaust, the transatlantic slave trade. If you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, scroll down the page, you'll see the information for the class. Click right here on register here, and it takes you to the next page. Click on enroll. And as soon as you register, you can start watching the bonus content. You can join us in class live Sunday, July 4th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We do the class live. All the sessions are recorded, so if you miss anything, you can go back and watch it over and over again. All right, we're out of time here. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. And also email us at AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNshow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. To advertise with the African History Network. You can also watch the African History Network show on blackonpurposetv.com, blackonpurposetv.com, BOP TV.com. I talked to Michael Campbell, CEO of Black on Purpose. So they started uploading episodes of our shows daily also.
On Purpose Television Network. Yes, Black on Purpose Television Network. All black, all positive, all the time. The largest black-owned streaming television network in the world. Bringing our people together worldwide. Controlling our messages, our stories, our way. Black TV the way it should be. Black music, Black history, and more. 30+ channels, thousands of shows. Black on Purpose Television Network. Subscribe now.
Gain knowledge in minutes from insightful summaries of progressive and socially conscious books. Blacklisted gives you access to curated content that'll satisfy your curiosity to learn and understand different perspectives. Empower yourself through inspirational and actionable ideas. It's easy to read or listen to on the go. Blacklisted. Empower yourself. Start your free trial today.
All right. We're out of time here. Remember, right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace.